What if I told you a vibrant 29-year-old woman was captured on CCTV walking home on a busy city street, had a brief friendly chat with a stranger, and then vanished into the night?
It's a scenario that's it's terrifyingly ordinary, isn't it?
Exactly. It's that moment of maximum vulnerability when you let down your guard because you are just blocks from safety. You're on the phone, you're almost there, and that brief, friendly chat becomes the absolute breaking point.
Precisely. And that ordinary CCTV clip, that little grainy piece of footage, it became one of the most watched and analyzed pieces of evidence in Australian history. It captured the last moments before a horrific crime that I think really shook a nation to its core.
And the power of that visual, the fact that we, the public, could watch her final moments, watch her walk away with the man who took her life, that's what made this case resonate so deeply. It hits that core fear of violence against women in public spaces.
Jill Meagher, an Irish national, was last seen on Sydney Road in Brunswick, Melbourne, at about 1:41 a.m. on Saturday, September 22, 2012. Her disappearance, followed by the tragic discovery, it triggered a public outcry and a demand for systemic accountability, unlike anything seen before in Australia.
This case wasn't just a local tragedy, it felt like a national wound. It forced people to question the safety they had taken for granted in their own communities.
This deep dive isn't just about a crime. It's about how a single videotape unraveled a lie, united a city in grief and anger, and exposed a dangerous, decades-long failure in the justice system.
Welcome to Whispers of Crime.
Subscribe to Whispers of Crime on YouTube. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Jill Meagher, she's 29, she's vibrant, originally from Ireland.
That's right. She'd moved to Australia with her husband Tom Meagher and was working for the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. They lived in Brunswick, which is an inner Melbourne suburb.
And Brunswick, from what I understand, is known for being trendy, eclectic, a place with a really vibrant nightlife. It's the kind of dense, high-traffic, inner-city area that usually feels inherently safe, right? Just because of the sheer number of people around.
That's the feeling the sources really emphasize, that sense of safety. So on Friday night, September 21, 2012, Jill was out socializing with her ABC colleagues. They were at a nearby spot called Bar Etiquette.
And the timeline here is obviously critical.
Absolutely. She leaves the bar around 1:30 a.m. on Saturday morning.
So we're in the very early hours of Saturday. She's had a fun night. She's just heading home. How far was the walk?
Less than a kilometer. A very, very short distance.
This is heartbreaking.
And the agony of this detail is that a colleague actually offered her a cab ride.
And she said no.
She declined. She made that fateful, completely mundane decision to walk instead. She hugged the colleague, exchanged a kiss on the cheek, and just started walking alone up Sydney Road.
It's the kind of rational, split-second choice countless women make every single night. You weigh the inconvenience and the cost of a cab against what feels like a minimal risk for a short walk. In retrospect, that calculation is just devastating.
Meanwhile, her husband, Tom Meagher, was at home. He'd fallen asleep on the couch, and he'd missed an earlier message from Jill suggesting he join her for a drink.
Oh, no.
He woke up around 2 a.m., and he immediately tried calling her. No answer. So he started sending text messages.
And that's the start of that awful slide into panic, isn't it? I mean, 2 a.m. is late, but there are 100 benign explanations. A dead phone, she stopped at a friend's house. But when does that shift from just rational worry to that primal, absolute fear?
For Tom, that rationalization evaporated very, very quickly. By 4 a.m., just 2 hours after his first call, he was out of their home. He was walking the streets himself, retracing her possible route along Sydney Road, just desperately searching.
Wow, that's fast.
And by 6 a.m., the fear was absolute. He contacted the police and reported his wife missing.
That must be an immediate descent into emotional hell. Right. And tragically, reporting a missing adult often means the police, following their strict protocol, they have to initially treat the spouse as a person of interest.
Absolutely. That's a huge emotional hurdle for someone who's already in just unimaginable distress.
Yeah.
They had to eliminate those closest to her first. So they went to Jill and Tom's home. They searched the flat. They searched their car. This agonizing protocol, all captured and broadcast by the media, must have felt like a terrible compounding injustice for Tom.
It's interesting, though, that his intuition, his frantic search, was already so far ahead of the official process. He knew by 6 a.m. something was terribly, terribly wrong. Did the police or journalists ever feel he was being insincere in those first few days?
The sources confirmed that initial suspicion was very quickly put to rest. Well, those close to the case were just completely convinced by Tom's raw emotion. He appeared transparent, sincere, and very, very upset. Journalists noted there was this genuine fear in his eyes that something terribly, terribly wrong had happened. That led investigators to pivot their focus almost immediately, away from him and toward the public space, toward the streets.
And that sincerity, it allowed the community's focus to shift instantly toward finding Jill, to galvanizing support around her, rather than getting distracted by, internal police processes.
And that shift was instantaneous, and it was digital. By Sunday afternoon, so the day after she disappeared, the Help Us Find Jill Meagher Facebook page was created by family and friends. And this just sparked an unprecedented level of interest. The page got 90,000 followers within just 4 days.
90,000 people in 4 days back in 2012, that's staggering. It just shows the immediate visceral power of social media to mobilize public consciousness around a single crime. She became a symbol almost instantly.
Police publicly responded that Sunday afternoon, appealing for information. And commentators noted that Jill fit the profile of the ideal victim in the media's eyes. Young, attractive, employed by a high-profile organization, the ABC, and doing what any ordinary woman should be able to do in a safe society.
Right.
This profile, combined with that social media push, it just enhanced the story's newsworthiness dramatically. Criminologists would later call this case a signal crime for Melbourne, one that had the potential to radically change public behavior and public trust.
So the investigation is relying heavily on public tips, but the days are passing. Sunday turns into Monday. When did the police get their first real material clue that confirmed foul play?
On Monday, police located Jill's handbag. It contained her ABC ID badge, and it was found in a secluded laneway off Hope Street.
And that laneway was close to where she was last seen.
Very close.
That must have been a horrible jolt definitive proof that she hadn't just wandered off or had an accident. But wait, if they searched that area initially, why wasn't the bag found until Monday? That detail feels highly suspicious.
It was suspicious, and it immediately complicated the timeline. The sources say police initially wondered if this was some kind of smokescreen meant to divert the investigation.
A smokescreen, you mean planted by the attacker?
Exactly. But the truth, however, it lay in a seemingly minor and incredibly frustrating delay.
Frustrating how? What was the delay?
A local resident had actually found the bag earlier. He'd taken it home and then, completely spooked by the extensive news coverage, decided to return it to where he claimed he'd found it.
Oh, you're kidding me. So it was a red herring, but it was created by someone trying to, not get involved?
That's right. It was an inadvertent complication. It wasted precious time, but it did confirm they were looking for an offender, not just a missing person.
So the community's attempt to help, or I guess avoid trouble, ended up complicating the timeline and the initial police narrative. The tension must have been building so intensely by Tuesday afternoon.
And that's when the decisive breakthrough came. A Brunswick shop owner came forward with CCTV footage. It was captured by a fixed camera located inside her store pointed out at the street. And this footage showed Jill at 1:41 a.m.
This is it. This is the haunting footage the public would become obsessed with. The visual that brought the entire abstract crime into terrifying focus.
Correct. The footage showed Jill walking. She seems to be on her mobile phone. Then a man in a blue hoodie approaches her. They speak briefly.
And the interaction looks casual.
It appears non-threatening, even friendly. They don't appear to know each other at all. And then they walk away together, out of the camera's frame.
That brief final moment of normalcy, that's the horror of it. The investigation instantly narrowed from missing person in a large city to abduction by this specific person.
The police released the footage almost immediately, identifying the man in the blue hoodie as a person of interest. The public reaction was just intense. Social commentators noted that watching this footage over and over again appealed to voyeuristic tendencies while simultaneously reinforcing a collective sense of horror and powerlessness.
And the social media mobilization, which was already huge, must have absolutely exploded when that definitive image was released.
It did. The sources tracked some staggering engagement numbers. 33 million Twitter feeds mention the case. The missing person page reached 107,000 likes. And that public scrutiny of the video, it led directly to the next crucial step, identifying a pattern of behavior.
How did that pattern emerge?
Well, Prompted by the public airing of the footage, other women started coming forward. They used social media, traditional media outlets, everything. They claimed to have been approached or even assaulted in that same area by a man matching the description.
So other incidents.
Yes. For instance, a writer and comedian tweeted that a man resembling the description had tried to knock her off her bike in that same area earlier in the year.
So this single piece of footage helped police connect the dots on a pattern of long-term predatory behavior, something the community was maybe vaguely aware of but hadn't connected. The technology served as a warning system, a catalyst for all this suppressed information to finally surface.
Precisely. The social media campaign was widely credited for helping to solve the case because the sheer number of people who came forward after that CCTV footage had been viewed millions of times. It was a defining moment in proving the power of social media, but it also, as we'll see, created some serious legal conflicts later on.
Okay, so while the public is focused on the man in the blue hoodie, the police are working other angles. What was the actual breakthrough that led them to a suspect?
It came from methodical detective work combined with some high-tech data analysis. They shifted focus from the visuals, from the CCTV, and onto Jill's abandoned mobile phone.
The digital breadcrumb trail. It's the key to so many modern cases. But how exactly do you go from a phone signal to identifying a specific person?
Well, investigators meticulously tracked Jill's mobile phone signal. They found the phone was active in the Brunswick area until about 4:30 a.m. that Saturday morning.
Hours after she vanished from the CCTV frame.
Right. And crucially, the signal then started traveling rapidly north, which suggested it was moving inside a vehicle, probably along the Hume Freeway or the Tullamarine Freeway.
So they have a vehicle moving quickly out of the city at a specific time, and they know the mobile phone was inside it. That's a powerful intersection of data. But how do you link a cell tower ping to one specific car on a busy freeway?
This is the critical, really technical investigative step. The detectives cross-reference the phone tower data, specifically pings off a tower at Moreland Road, with vehicle photographs taken at the Gantry toll point on the freeway.
So they're matching the time of the phone ping to photos of cars passing the toll booth at that exact same time.
Exactly. They were looking for any car passing that specific point at the precise time the phone signal was moving rapidly north.
That is incredibly detailed police work. I mean, it sounds like they were really pushing the limits of the technology available at the time.
They certainly were. And this methodical process, it identified a vehicle owned by a 41-year-old man named Adrian Bayley.
And what did they know about him?
Well, this is where the immediate, terrifying shock for investigators comes in. When they pulled up his name, they realized Bayley was not just some random person of interest. He was a well-known, convicted serial sex offender who was currently free on parole.
Wait, a known violent predator, free on parole, whose car is now linked to a missing woman's phone heading out of Melbourne hours after she disappeared. The systemic failure was already glaringly obvious before they even found Jill.
Bayley was tracked down and arrested on September 27th. That's nearly a week after Jill's disappearance. Police immediately began an intense 10-hour interview.
And he denied it, I assume.
He denied all involvement initially. He claimed he only knew about the disappearance from the news. And the records show Bayley had a long history of this, denying involvement for hundreds of questions before eventually breaking.
So he was experienced in the interrogation room. He was trying to stick to a script. What piece of evidence finally broke his denial?
While the police were interviewing Bayley, a simultaneous search of his home was underway. And the investigation's most significant breakthrough, it came from the least expected source.
Which was?
Jill Meagher's SIM card. It was found in the washing machine by Bayley's then-girlfriend.
The SIM card. That tiny microscopic piece of data providing the definitive, unarguable link. How did the police use that to break him?
They didn't even need to show him the card. The implication was enough. They had an irrefutable link tying him directly to the victim. I mean, how else does Jill's SIM card, stripped from her phone, get into Adrian Bayley's private home?
Right. There's no explanation for that.
None. And after 6 or 7 hours of questioning, faced with that undeniable truth, Bayley broke. He confessed to the rape and murder, and he led police to her body.
Where was she found? And did the confession clarify the timing of the attack?
She was found buried in a shallow grave near Gisborne South, which is north of Melbourne. And the sources confirmed the attack was brutal and it was fast. Jill Meagher was raped and strangled in a nearby laneway off Hope Street, right around where she was last seen, shortly after that casual chat captured on the CCTV footage.
A laneway, a seemingly safe shortcut. becoming the scene of a brutal, opportunistic crime just moments after she was visible to the world.
Bayley was charged with rape and murder at 2 a.m. on September 28th. He initially contested the charges, but eventually, on April 2013, he formally pleaded guilty. The answer was found. But that answer only opened up the larger, more terrifying question about the system that had allowed this known predator to be walking free on Sydney Road that morning.
And that's the part that is just so infuriating. The revelation that the man responsible for this high-profile crime was a violent serial sex offender who should have been behind bars, that's what transformed this tragedy into a national reckoning. It stopped being just a case file and became a critical indictment of the entire Australian justice system.
That is precisely the narrative shift. And the true, shocking extent of Bayley's history was only revealed when a suppression order was revoked at his pre-sentence hearing, allowing all the details of his decades-long career as a predator to be publicly released.
What exactly did his criminal history look like? I mean, was he truly a high-risk predator operating for decades, or was this a recent escalating pattern of behavior?
His history of sexual and violent offenses spanned over 2 decades, and it started incredibly early. When he was only 18, he committed the first of more than 20 rapes on a 16-year-old friend of his sister.
18 years old.
And just 4 months later, he attempted to rape a 16-year-old hitchhiker.
That speed of escalation and the youth of the victims are terrifying. What was the judicial response to those early crimes back in 1991?
In 1991, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for those first 2 assaults. But reflecting the judicial approach at the time, which was heavily centered on rehabilitation, he was released after only 2 years.
2 years for 2 violent sexual assaults. That reflects a systemic underestimation of the danger he posed right from the very start.
Then came the 2002 convictions, and these paint a picture of a calculated, experienced predator. Bayley pleaded guilty to 16 counts of rape committed between 2000 and 2001.
16 counts.
Against 5 sex workers in an area called Elwood. And the sources stress that he used highly specific and deliberate tactics, things like maneuvering his car close to a wall to physically prevent his victims from opening the passenger door to escape.
That calculated, premeditated detail. It shows a terrifying commitment to control. It's a clear, high risk of reoffending. What did the judge say about him during that 2002 trial?
At the time of that trial, Judge Tony Duckett noted that Bayley had subjected his victims to deliberate humiliation, and that his conduct went far beyond mere sexual gratification. The judge said he used an array of threats and violence to satisfy his gross sexual appetite.
Gross sexual appetite. And despite that clear understanding of his predatory nature, he was sentenced to what?
11 years imprisonment with an 8-year non-parole period.
So even with the judge calling him out like that, he only gets a minimum of 8 years for 16 counts of rape. How is that sentence justified?
Well, judicial sentencing guidelines at the time generally prioritized rehabilitation and proportionality. So the non-parole period was set significantly lower than the total sentence to, in theory, incentivize good behavior and reintegration planning. But critics argued the sentence was just grossly inadequate for the gravity and volume of his crimes.
It sounds like an institutional inability to truly contain a predator of this type.
Regardless, he became eligible for parole in 2011 and was released, with his parole set to expire in March 2013.
So, everyone knew this man was exceptionally dangerous, calculating, and highly likely to reoffend. How, then, was he walking free in September 2012, just 6 months before his parole officially ended? This is the critical, unforgivable failure.
The Adult Parole Board, or the APB, which is the statutory body responsible for these high-stakes decisions, they let him out under supervision. But the system was fundamentally broken in Bayley's case because he reoffended while he was on parole.
What was the specific reoffense that should have sent him back to prison immediately?
In February 2012, 7 months before he attacked Jill, Bayley was accused of assaulting a man. Geelong Magistrates Court sentenced him to 3 months in prison for that offense.
Okay, so that should have triggered an immediate parole revocation hearing.
It should have. But what happened instead is Bayley appealed against the 3-month prison term. The mechanism of the law at the time allowed a successful appeal to place an automatic stay of execution on the sentence.
A stay of execution.
Yes. This legal technicality successfully released him from custody while his appeal was pending. And that successful appeal is what allowed Adrian Bayley to be free when he attacked and murdered Jill Meagher in September 2012.
So let me get this straight. A minor legal maneuver appealing a 3-month sentence for assault is the specific loophole that allowed a known serial rapist to be on the streets. He should have been in prison. or at the very least confined due to a parole breach. It is the clearest, most direct indictment of systemic negligence I have ever heard.
And the societal scrutiny of the APB immediately intensified. Critics argued that the system didn't fail, the people on the parole board failed. They were seen as more concerned about the supposed rehabilitation of a serial rapist than the safety of our young women.
What was the APB's defense for this colossal oversight? Were they just overworked, or was there a fundamental problem with their risk assessment tools?
The defense often pointed to the fact that their workload was intolerably heavy in that era, 2011 to 2012. The APB had only 24 members processing an estimated 10,000 decisions a year.
10,000.
Yes. And this massive volume, they argued, forced them to move quickly and potentially overlook critical risk factors or just failed to coordinate the pending assault charge with his parole status effectively.
But even if parole generally reduces reoffending, that defense is meaningless here. Given Bayley's decades-long history, surely the risk assessment tools should have been screaming red flags, regardless of the board's workload.
You've hit the core tension. Experts offered the counter-argument that parole overall provides essential supervision and statistically reduces reoffending compared to just releasing prisoners cold. They caution that hard cases make bad law when considering a complete legislative overhaul based on one horrific event.
But this wasn't just a hard case. This was a catastrophic failure.
It was. In this specific instance, Bayley's case shows the risk assessment failed at multiple points. First, in the initial sentencing, and second, and most critically, in the decision not to revoke his parole immediately after the assault charge in February 2012.
Amidst all of the political and legal chaos that was triggered by Bayley's history, the dignity shown by Jill Meagher's family, especially her husband Tom, it provided this powerful emotional anchor for the entire public narrative.
He became the voice of the devastated victim. He ensured the focus remained powerfully on the life Jill lived and the loss that was suffered, rather than solely on the system's bureaucratic failure.
What did he say?
Tom spoke very powerfully about the impact of the tragedy. He said that the failure of the justice system had ruined the free, trusting way that he and Jill had lived their lives. He described Jill as the funniest gun in the world, witty and so smart. He also noted that while he loved to think about her, it was often very intrusive, because something will just pop into your head about the horrific manner of her death.
That shattering of trust and freedom, not just for him, but for the wider community, that is the profound collateral damage of a crime like this.
And it propelled the largest public demonstration of grief Melbourne had ever seen. On Sunday, September 30th, 2012, just 2 days after the discovery of Jill's body, approximately 30,000 people participated in the March for Jill.
30,000 people.
They walked silently along Sydney Road, the road where she took her last steps.
That is an overwhelming, moving display of communal grief. It wasn't just a memorial, was it? What did that silent march come to symbolize?
It quickly morphed into a profound symbol of broader public concerns about violence against women and the deep frustration with the legal system's failure to protect the community from known high-risk offenders.
And turning to the judicial outcome, Bayley pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 35 years in June 2013. Was that the final tally of his crimes, or did the high-profile nature of this case force more truths to the surface?
The intense publicity had a secondary horrifying consequence. Due to the widespread coverage, 3 more women, 2 sex workers, and a Dutch backpacker came forward about rapes committed by Bayley before he murdered Jill Meagher.
So he was actively operating as a serial predator while on parole. And these victims were only brave enough to come forward because Jill's case made the public aware of the specific identity of the predator. That is a grim confirmation.
By this time, Bayley had been convicted of sexual crimes against 12 different people. He was subsequently sentenced to another 18 years in May 2015 for those additional rapes.
And that extended his non-parole period.
It did. It extended his minimum non-parole period from 35 years to 43 years. This was later reduced to 40 years on appeal in July 2016, making him eligible for parole in 2055 at the age of 83.
A terrifying legacy. But parallel to the official investigation, there was this digital firestorm unfolding, the trial by social media that threatened the integrity of the official trial itself.
Yes, the sources detail this conflict intensely. Immediately after Bayley's arrest, the anger just boiled over online. Hate groups like Publicly Hang Adrian Ernest Bayley were created. Users quickly spread his photo, which they recovered from a cached Facebook profile, and speculated wildly about his criminal history, often repeating unverified details.
And this is where Australian sub judice contempt law comes into play. For our global audience, what exactly is this law, and why did the online reaction create such a legal conflict?
Sub judice contempt law strictly regulates prejudicial pretrial publication. Essentially, once a case is before the court, media or public comments can't be published if they might prejudice or contaminate the evidence presented to a jury, or compromise the accused's right to a fair trial. The concern here was that the public, acting as digital vigilantes, was potentially undermining the case.
Australian media law experts warn specifically about publishing the accused's image, noting that an image can replace itself in the mind of an eyewitness, and it renders eyewitness testimony inherently unreliable. But trying to control publication on global platforms like Facebook or Twitter must have felt virtually impossible.
It was described as unenforceable. The debate immediately shifted to whether the sub judice contempt law was basically obsolete in the face of new digital communication. Victoria Police and the Attorney General used their official channels to advise the public against posting legally risky material, and they eventually threatened legal action against platforms like Facebook and individual users.
Did Facebook comply with the suppression order?
After several weeks of refusing to delete the hate groups, Facebook finally removed them in early October 2012. But the conflict highlighted the global challenge that social media poses to jurisprudence. The speed of information Meagher's name was mentioned every 11 seconds on social media on the day of Bayley's arrest was just overwhelming the judicial process.
Despite all that contention, the enduring legacy of Jill Meagher is the actual legislative change it triggered. What concrete reforms came out of the Callan Review into the parole system? What is Jill's law?
The murder forced massive legislative changes in Victoria, known informally as Jill's Law, aimed at permanently closing the loophole that allowed Bayley to be free. The review by former High Court Justice Ian Callanan led to the parole system reform program, backed by millions in investment.
And what was the most significant change in how the Adult Parole Board made decisions?
Crucially, the safety and protection of the community was enshrined in legislation as the paramount consideration in all parole decisions. This legally shifted the balance away from rehabilitation as the singular focus, making public protection the highest priority.
And that seems like a crucial structural change.
It was. Additionally, prisoners now had to actively apply for parole rather than being automatically considered when they became eligible. The reforms also included making a breach of parole a new criminal offense, punishable by up to 3 months in jail and a fine. These reforms were immediately effective, resulting in a 27% decline in prisoners released on parole in the years following.
Now, this gets complex, but we need to address it. Jill Meagher's murder also led directly to the tightening of bail laws. But those changes, while trying to prevent another Bayley tragedy, later came under heavy criticism for their unintended consequences.
Yes, that's right. Meagher's murder directly led to the 2013 tightening of the Bail Act. It introduced new bail offenses, specifically targeting those who committed an indictable offense while on bail, which would immediately suggest high risk. This was aimed squarely at situations like Bayley's.
That sounds logical on the surface, but the application was where the problem lay, correct?
Precisely. The changes, which were intensified after another tragedy in 2017, they fundamentally changed the burden of proof. They implemented what is known as the reverse onus bail test for a much wider array of offenses.
And the reverse onus test means?
It requires the accused person to prove that their case is unusual or rare enough, that there are exceptional circumstances to justify their release. This reversed the typical principle that the burden of proof lies with the prosecution.
So instead of the prosecution having to prove you were a danger, you had to prove you weren't, or at least that your case was an anomaly.
Exactly. And this put a massive legal and financial burden on vulnerable populations: Aboriginal people, women facing family violence charges, people with substance abuse or homelessness issues who often lack the resources to meet that high bar of exceptional circumstances.
That's a crucial insight. The emotional reaction to a horrific, violent crime sometimes creates a cascade of overly broad laws that unintentionally impact low-level, non-violent offenders.
And that's what happened. The system tightened the net so widely that the number of Victorians held on remand significantly increased, which led to subsequent reforms in 2023 to try and correct that imbalance.
Looking forward, you mentioned the parole eligibility date of 2055. Is there any latest news or developments in this case, say as of late 2025?
Well, as of late 2025, Adrian Bayley remains in a maximum security prison. There are no new legal challenges on the horizon from his end. The main development has been the ongoing analysis of the parole and bail reforms. The 2023 bail amendments are still being assessed for their impact, trying to find that delicate balance we discussed. The conversation now is less about Bayley himself and more about the long-term health of the justice system his crimes exposed. The Meagher family continues to advocate for victims' rights, but very privately. Tom Meagher, in particular, has focused his efforts on broader campaigns against violence against women, ensuring the focus remains on positive change rather than on the perpetrator.
When we look at the legacy of Jill Meagher, we have to confront the uncomfortable, infuriating truth. A known, calculating predator, described by a judge as a ticking time bomb, was free due to multiple systemic failures. Specifically, that technicality allowing the appeal of a minor prison term. That reality is just devastating.
Jill Meagher's murder was a random attack on a beautiful, vibrant human being that simply shouldn't have happened. The system had multiple opportunities to intervene, and it failed her every single time. Her story forced a national conversation, demonstrating how one individual's private tragedy can become a catalyst for crucial legislative changes.
The public outcry and the collective grief were so intense, culminating in that 30,000-person silent march, that it was impossible for lawmakers to ignore the fundamental need for reform. They had to ensure that community safety, rather than just rehabilitation, was the core, paramount priority of the parole board.
And while technology played a pivotal role in her investigation, from the crucial CCTV footage and the phone tracking, it also exposed the deep conflict between the public's right to information and the accused's right to a fair trial. It's a conflict that legal systems worldwide are still grappling with. Jill's story is a signal crime of the modern digital age, where tragedy and activism converge instantly online.
Don't forget to subscribe to Whispers of Crime on YouTube and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and all major podcast platforms. Like, share, and comment on this deep dive to help us reach more people who need to hear Jill Meagher's story.
We leave you with this final thought. Jill Meagher's final moments were captured on film, freezing a moment of terrifying normalcy. But the enduring lesson of her death is this. The greatest dangers often come not from the shadows, but from the glaring loopholes and failures embedded within the systems designed to protect us. The question for policymakers remains, how do we craft laws to catch the Baileys of the world without unintentionally trapping the vulnerable?